Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to take you on a journey here, so check your seatbelts. Make sure they're tightly fastened. We're going to be moving back in time, and we're going to be moving forward in time. And in fact, always, CNN has got us up to date here. There's a comment today on CNN. Let me just go back here, So, 2 new studies suggest Paris Climate Accord is dead. Okay? Last month was the hottest month ever. 1.65 degrees above the Industrial Revolution mark. So yes, lots to talk about, lots to think about. I had a great deal of trouble kind of coming up with what to talk about here. But let me begin by thanking everybody for being here. It's been a very inspiring morning. Very inspiring. I've learned a lot. So some of what I'm going to touch upon has already been touched upon a little bit maybe, but we shall see. So to give you a lecture outline initially, a little bit of awareness of nature in our lives, and most of you are quite familiar with that, but I think one of the messages I have from this is that we need to communicate much more. And we'll come to that. We're going to talk about love and peace. So being a child of the 60s, and I see that there's some people here who can relate to being a child of the 60s, love and peace is very important. We're going to appreciate natural medicinal agents now and for the future. That topic is kind of missing from a lot of the discussions that go on around the world with respect to climate change and biodiversity issues. And then we're going to redefine waste. Redefine waste. I haven't heard much about that topic here today. So, natural products are valuable, we all know that. Shelter, furniture, clothes, foodstuffs, resins, gums, waxes, probably don't think too much about that. Flavoring agents and spices, especially here in a country like Thailand where everything is so beautifully flavored. Perfumes and cosmetics, yes, of course. I'm going to talk a little bit about prescription and OTC pharmaceuticals and traditional medicines, because that's a major topic in most of the world. And don't forget the natural herbicides and insecticides that are out there. And of course we need to take ownership for the substances of abuse. So we're in very deep contact with nature in many different formats. And in fact our interdependence, is very sacrosanct in that respect. The question, of course, now is a much deeper one, which is how do we maintain this continuity after COP28 and COP29? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. In just a little while. There's a couple of myths that are important. I'm going to mention just one of them here today, which is that the plants will always be there. This is kind of common myth that the resources are always going to be there for us to access. And until we cope with this, and a new mindset and action cannot happen while this reality is denied. It's kind of an inhibitor to some of what we do. There's been some mention of this in various parts of the morning's lectures, talking about drought and flooding and wildfires and pollution. And of course these are very important aspects when we come to look at the products of plants, whether those are the design aspects or whether they're the functional aspects, particularly in terms of the chemistry of the plants, which is what, as a synthetic organic chemist, that's what I've been involved with for many, many years now. The nature of the plants themselves changes as soon as we change the environment. So the metabolites change. So the chemistry changes, the biology changes, and therefore the function with respect to medicinal agents changes. One of the points that we need to keep reminding ourselves of is this one, that we've got about a very restricted timeline here. We're in 2025, we've got 8.19, 8.2 billion people on the planet. But by 2057, we're going to be up to around 6.6 billion people. And you'll notice at that point that the gas and oil supplies are disappeared, or will have dissipated, or will be so expensive that it won't be possible to get them from the earth. Coal is going to survive probably till maybe 2100 or so. But we're going to be missing a couple of important resources here. And then what happens? And then what happens? So we're in this place now, I think, where for hundreds of years we've been fairly disciplined in the way we regard nature. But now we're moving into a place of deep chaos. And it's at that edge of discipline and chaos that the creativity starts. So what the opportunities we have now in terms of creativity, of creating an environment that will be useful, not just for us, but for future generations. Because let's go back in time. Let's look at what St. Hildegard of Bingen said. The earth which sustains humanity must not be destroyed, for without it, we cannot survive. Never was that more true than the place where we are today. So the question is, what must we maintain for the future? Chief Seattle was chief of the Suquamish tribe in northwestern United States. Says we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it. We borrow it from our children. And when I read that, I was inspired. It was quite a few years ago now. I was inspired to write an article. This is actually an old presentation. For those who will follow, not for us, but for our descendants. Not for us. And it was published, interestingly enough, in the Thai Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences 33 years ago. And this is what I said. Preserving indigenous knowledge, developing our resources in a sustainable way, and potentiating the richness of our biological and cultural wealth is the ultimate gift we can offer our descendants. Where we seem to be now is at this junction of our relationship with technology. So almost everyone in the room, I'm sure, has been consulting their phone. All right? I'm not sure why we call it a smartphone anymore, but they've been consulting, all right? But we need that balance, don't we? We need that balance with nature, because that's what we're going to be passing on. So we have to restore. And one of the things I've been involved with in the last few years or so is working with acronyms. And one of the acronyms is this one, restore. What's restore? It's regenerate earth with shrubs and trees, or relinquish everything. There's some examples, and you've seen these kinds of things before. The one at the bottom right there is actually Chicago City Hall. I happen to live in Chicago. So what's love? What's love? We've been dealing with love ever since humanity kind of developed on Earth. Love is learning to optimize the valuables of Earth. Learning to optimize the valuables of Earth. That's what we're doing. That's what we have to do. That's what we're dedicated to do. And doing it sustainably. So what's peace? What's peace? That's the peace symbol. It wasn't originally the peace symbol, but it is now. It's generally accepted. So peace is preservation of Earth's assets. Is critical for our existence. Preservation of Earth's assets is critical for our existence, not waging a war on nature. Sustainability is not a destination. It's not a destination, it's our journey, forever, for the rest of humanity. For too long we buried our heads in our sand. But Jack Welch said a very interesting thing a few years ago. Face reality as it is, not as it was, or as you wish it to be. It's a different reality we're living in now. So our research programs, our actions, our developments must also acknowledge this and focus on that reality. So what's medicine security? It's the notion that, in fact, we have to preserve the origin of the medicines that we use, whether those are synthetic or whether those are natural. I'm not going to go through all of this list here. But it's very important to have a patient-centered approach. We're all patients, and we're relying on medicines. Many of those medicines come from nature, from plant material. We're also in an age when we're moving into transitioning into defossilization period. And what that means is that reducing and eventually eliminating the dependence of both synthetic and natural drugs on fossil fuels as the starting point and for processing. And that's not being discussed very much in terms of COP28 and COP29. Because they're focused on energy. But as soon as you get into energy and fossil fuels, you start to getting into the issue of the chemicals and where they're going to come from. And that includes both the natural products and the synthetics. So one of the things that's going to have to happen is there's going to have to be a product assessment needed for continuing access, to maintain that access to medicines of the future. And which medicinal agents will be lost in that process becomes a very important consideration for global health. We're not going to talk too much about that. It also is an incredible opportunity for emerging biowaste, for that whole economy. We'll mention that in a couple of minutes or so. So natural product development, and we can call it bioprospecting, whatever you want to call it, is an essential fit into sustainably developing aspects of research for maintenance of medicines security. So where are medicinal agents going to come from in the future? Well, love in this respect is not an option, because we have to maintain and we have to explore in a much deeper sense the role of nature for our future in healthcare. It's an ethical obligation. It's an ethical obligation for all future generations. We used to think of nature just as a reservoir for medicinal agents. No, it's the way we're going to be producing them in the future. So let us switch a little bit to some of the topics that have been discussed this morning. So it's exposure to nature in your life. What are your daily expectations of nature? Do you think about nature in the course of the day, where your food comes from, how it originates, as you look around the environment? How do you appreciate your environment? How has that changed over time? You see the environment differently now. So one of the things we have to do, I think, is to get to a point where biophilia, this appreciation of nature in the urban environment, is much more important. So exposing urbanites to natural plant and animal diversity. Right? How do you do that? Chicago has a free zoo. I'm not a big proponent of zoos, but it exposes everybody in the culture environment of Chicago to an opportunity. And we've got some other amazing assets in Chicago too. Foster an appreciation of external effects. The notion that people really understand that why the price of coffee, why the price of chocolate, why the price of olives is going to go up. Right? That's environmentally based. And also providing local experiences. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that. So one of the things that strikes me is that maybe we need to go back to the future here. And what is relevant from the past that interrelates horticulture, medicinal plants, sustainability, public awareness, and education? What puts all those together? The physic garden. The physic garden. Amazing. The oldest medicinal plant garden in the world is in Padua. 1545 was founded. Still there. It's still a site of education about the value of nature in terms of its medicinal agents. And don't forget aspirin in this regard, by the way. Don't forget aspirin. Where do you think that came from? Bayer, 1899, all right? Put it out. This SPIR in aspirin comes from the name of the genus of plants. Another one in London, Chelsea Physic Garden, wonderful place. Founded in 1673 by the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries. Right? Nicholas Culpeper, famous for his herbal, right, from which the lead for aspirin came from. Published in 1653. So taught there. And again, a wonderful place, and a reminder about the value of medicinal plants in the culture. There's one in Bangkok too, Swanlai Ramanine Botanic Gardens in Bangkok, which has a beautiful medicinal plant garden. It was founded based on the 60th birthday of Her Royal Highness, Princess Seringal. And everything is beautifully organized and beautifully labeled there. It's a wonderful educational site. So some local plant experiences foster increased awareness. So we talk about developing city gardens and byways and rooftop, and we've seen lots of examples of that. But if you're going to put them there, if there are medicinal plants involved, and there's a lot of medicinal plants that are also ornamentals, label them. Tell them what the value is to society, not just as an ornamental, not just for the CO2, but for society itself. What's it doing for society itself? Develop waste lots with wild plants. We've been doing that in our suburb in Chicago. Develop library programs right? Relationship to the community in that sense, and green education about the value of plants, and improve the utilization of horticultural waste, for example. Label medicinal and toxic plants in the botanic gardens. I get very disappointed when I see a botanic garden, including medicinal plant gardens, where the things are not properly labeled. Right? That needs to happen. That's communication. And it's a place to teach the young people. It's a place to teach the young people. Let me just say something on the side at the moment. So we're in this situation now, and I'm kind of working quite hard to help the young people understand the value of medicinal plants in the world and where their medicines come from. But I think that 20, 30 years from now, a lot of young people are going to be, young people today, are going to be very upset with us, my generation, because we haven't done what we should be doing. So, we've got some examples of medicinal and toxic plants, and some of those used in horticulture, of course. You know, catharanthus and so on, peppermint, lemon, ginkgo. When you walk past a ginkgo tree, do you see the value of it? Why it's medicinal? But of course, we've also got the toxic ones that we have to be careful of. And you know, one of those is, of course, foxglove, and you've got lots of others, crocuses, daffodils that are used quite widely, but are toxic. We need to make sure that people are aware of those aspects. Catharanthus is my little favourite plant. Been working with that for many, many years. And it's an ornamental all over the world. Right? So outside the Taj Mahal, in Shwedagon, in Yangon, outside the Grand Palace in Bangkok, you find catharanthus. Right? But people don't typically realise that two of the great anti-cancer agents in the world that have been on the market since 1960 are from the leaves of that plant, and still are from the leaves of that plant. They're not synthetic, no, they're natural. So redefining waste. Interesting. Waste not, want not. Growing up in England after the war, yeah, I got that a lot. Waste not, want not. For want is next to waste, and shame doeth sin ensure. The paradise of dainty devices, from way back in 1576. So as the finite resources of the planet are diminished, love requires a deeper recognition and action to explore the potential of waste. What happens to the waste that you all generate in your horticultural explorations? Right? How's it used? Because we have to use that waste, lest future generations want for a disappeared resource. So we've got natural bio-waste, we've got chemical waste, we've got discarded fabrics. Right? Those are going to be our chemical sources for the future. So that's the bioeconomy that we're going to be working with, to develop chemicals in the future. That's where synthetic drugs are likely to be coming from, 30, 40 years from now. So waste must be seen as a starting material, it's an opportunity. It's part of the biocircular economy here. Developing chemicals, enzymes, polymers, fuels, you know about fuels through microbial transformations. So some strategies for the future. Restoring awareness and incorporating nature into our lives. Most of us in this room do that. Yeah, but what about the educational aspects of that? The transferring of that information and that reliance on nature and an awareness about nature to the young. Realizing that plants are and always will be an essential aspect of healing. Providing learning opportunities for all ages regarding where medicinal agents come from. Where medicinal agents come from. And now and in the future. And then turning city and industrial bio-waste into the basis for medicinal agents in the future. That's what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to be doing. Thank you very much indeed.